They didn't tell me why. Two Marines, silent, unsmiling, met me outside the CIC. I was in mid-brief, pointer in hand, red line on the sonar map still vibrating when the intercom chirped. Commander Moore, report to Deck 2. Escort waiting. No name, no rank. Just that. I nodded once to Lieutenant Garcia and set the pointer down. No one met my eyes in the corridor. They knew. Or maybe they'd been told not to know. We walked in silence. Past the comms room. Past berthing. The bulkheads that had always made me feel safe now closed in. The Liberty was steel in code and hum, my home for 7 years. I knew every echo of her. But this wasn't a walk I recognized. When we reached the hangar bay, there were no sidearms drawn. Just a quiet tension that didn't need words. My sea bag sat near the gangway, zipped and waiting. Someone had packed it for me. No ceremony. No explanations. I was simply no longer part of the ship. Orders, one of the Marines said, handing me a sealed envelope. They helped me into the small gray RHB without speaking. The lines were cast off. The ocean opened around us. Behind me, the Liberty faded, a shadow on the horizon shrinking. I kept the envelope unopened in my lap. I didn't need to read it. Whatever was inside, the truth had already begun. 2 hours passed. The sky thickened with mist. I checked the horizon, nothing. I'd been left adrift. No coordinates, no radio, no sails. Just the hum of the sea and the memory of everything I'd built now behind me. Then it rose. A shadow at first, too large to be any whale, too quiet to be any ship I knew. Water broke in a long, dark swell as the surface peeled open. A tower emerged. Black. Unmarked. No numbers. No flag. A submarine. Not ours. Not theirs. Something in between. Its sail crested 10 yards off my bow. Then it turned, slow and deliberate, and came straight for me. I didn't reach for the emergency beacon. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just watched. Whatever this was, this moment, this vessel, this expulsion from the known world, it was only the beginning. Before all this, there was sound. Constant sound. Pings, pulses, whispers threaded through water. That's what my world had been reading, silence, finding ghosts inside the ocean. Not just any ocean, not just any ghosts. I track what wasn't supposed to exist. I was 24 when I entered the Naval Postgraduate School. The only woman in my class. They didn't hide their doubt. I didn't hide my purpose. Signal intelligence. Underwater warfare. Acoustic shadows. I lived inside the frequencies, the decibels. By 29, I had designed 2 of the Navy's most sensitive passive tracking arrays. Nothing fancy. Just elegant, simple geometry nested in software that could hear the shift in noise between a drifting trawler and an electric fin drone running dark. By 32, I was assigned to the Liberty. She was a Nimitz-class ghost ship in some ways, always too modern for her age, rebuilt too often. She carried 10 squadrons of aircraft, 5 radar domes, 2 satellite dishes, and me. Or more accurately, my systems. Deck 8 housed the quietest room in the ship. Scar Bay, that's what we called it. Signal correlation and analysis room. Most sailors thought it was a storage bay. The real door was behind a false bulkhead. It smelled like cold air and old sweat. That was where we ran ops. My team was 5 people, Lieutenant Garcia, Chief Teal, Ensign No, Petty Officer Durrell, and me. 5 ears on the edge of the world. Every day we filtered noise from chaos. One day something new came in. It was faint. A flutter, just off the known bands. No thought it was harmonic interference. I didn't. I'd seen something like it before long ago. Jonathan and I had designed a ping in grad school, a kind of audio signature that could pierce enemy jamming. It had been our private joke. A failsafe only he and I knew. It never made it into deployment. Too unstable. Too personal. But that day in Scar Bay, I heard it again. Not the whole signature. Just a fragment. A ghost's breath. I logged it under anomalies and flagged it level 2. It was probably nothing. But something in me hesitated before filing it away. I told no one. Jonathan had vanished 3 years earlier. He'd been aboard the USS Clearwater, Virginia-class attack submarine. Last contact. 154 miles southwest of Luzon. Final message. System test complete. Proceeding to next waypoint. Then silence. They searched for 6 months. Sonar scans, dive teams, satellite sweeps. Nothing. The sea gave back no wreckage, no oil, no distress beacon. Just nothing. They called it a systems failure. The record says presumed dead. I knew better. Jonathan had designed his own encryption for emergency pings. A series of modulated bursts nested in ambient frequencies. No one but me would recognize them. The sound I'd heard that day, it had the same signature. Faint, degraded, like a message bouncing off walls too long. But it was him. I knew it like I knew my own voice. I went to the captain. I made the mistake of asking questions. He listened. He nodded. He promised to escalate. That night, the logs vanished from Scar Bay. The anomaly recording was gone. The next morning, 2 men in suits stood outside my quarters. I didn't get names. Just a clipboard with a reassignment order and a clearance revocation. I was to be off the Liberty within the hour. They didn't accuse. They didn't explain. Just, thank you for your service, Commander Moore. Your expertise is required elsewhere. I packed my things myself. Garcia passed me in the corridor. His jaw was clenched. He didn't speak, but I saw it in his eyes. He knew not to get involved. Teal wouldn't meet my gaze. No cried quietly when she handed me my personal laptop. Even Durrell, always mouthy, always brave, saluted me in silence, lips pressed tight. I carried my duffel down the gangway alone. There was no announcement. No goodbyes. No commendation ceremony. The Liberty turned east without me. A black envelope waited on the deck of the RHB. Inside were my orders: temporary leave, location unspecified, destination classified, clearance revoked. But I knew they weren't punishing me. They were redirecting me. Quietly, without a trace. Someone else had heard what I'd heard, and someone higher up was afraid of what it meant. They didn't want a scandal. They didn't want press. They wanted someone off-grid. Someone they could deny. I looked again at the fragment I'd saved, the one copy I had left, hidden inside a hollowed-out USB key in my jacket. The ping was weak, but it was still singing. And I was still listening. The sea didn't explain anything. I sat in that RHB for hours, tracing the same thoughts over and over. There's a certain silence out there, a kind that presses in. No walls. No engine hum. Just water and sky and the waiting. By then, the Liberty was gone. Not even a wisp on the horizon. I was untethered, cut loose. They didn't even leave me a compass. I opened the sealed envelope. It was thinner than I expected. 2 sheets, 1 set of coordinates, somewhere in the North Atlantic, and a brief line, interim reassignment, asset in transit. Comply with instructions upon contact. No name. No command seal. Just a black wax stamp, an anchor with no rope, the kind used only by black sub-ops branches I'd read about but never seen. Whatever came next was no longer in the books. Still, I waited. Nothing else to do. A gull circled once overhead, then vanished into the fog. Then the water split. It didn't breach with noise. It just opened. The unmarked submarine rose like an ink stain bleeding into the ocean. Matte black, no hull numbers. No flags. It drifted closer until I could see the curve of the sail, the armored hull plating. No windows. Just a single hatch opening at the top. A rope ladder dropped over the side. There was no voice calling out. No commands. Just the unspoken, come aboard or don't. I climbed. Inside, the light was dim and red. The air cold and metal-scented. A crewman in gray coveralls waited at the hatch, nodding once. No rank insignia. Just a patch on his shoulder, Eclipse. They didn't search me. Didn't ask questions. I was led below through narrow corridors and bulkheads that bore no markings. Everything about the vessel was utilitarian, no names, no division designations, no standard Navy fixtures. It was as if the ship had been built in silence and never officially existed. They gave me a room. Steel cot, bare desk, 1 locker. Inside the locker was a standard Navy jumpsuit with no name tag. My duffel had already been placed inside. The hatch closed behind me. I sat on the cot and exhaled, finally. This wasn't exile. This was containment. They hadn't thrown me away, they'd moved me into shadow. Off-record, off-grid. Not punished. Preserved. But why? The next morning I was summoned. The man who met me in the control room wasn't what I expected. Tall. Mid-50s. Weathered face. Clear eyes. No rank insignia. Just a simple introduction, Captain Granger. Welcome aboard the Eclipse. He didn't ask questions. He didn't offer answers. Just handed me a tablet. The screen showed a topographical scan of the ocean floor. Heat anomalies. Pressure points. Acoustic traces. Then the cursor hovered over one signal trace. The same frequency pattern I had logged. The one they erased. I looked up at him. He nodded once. So I began to understand. This wasn't about me. It was about the signal. About what it might mean. They hadn't thrown me into the sea to get rid of me. They placed me at the edge of something they couldn't risk touching directly. They needed what I knew. But they couldn't acknowledge it. Because if the signal was real, if that burst frequency truly came from where I thought, then the clear water wasn't lost. It wasn't destroyed. It was somewhere. Still operating. Or being operated. And if that was true, then Jonathan wasn't dead. He was something worse, alive and buried in silence. I didn't ask questions. Neither did Granger. We didn't need to. The agreement was quiet, professional. He gave me access. I gave him answers. For the next 48 hours, I lived in the Eclipse's ops center. I rebuilt my tracking algorithm from memory, using onboard sonar logs, field data, and degraded acoustic snapshots from passive buoys. The signal recurred 3 times across different sectors of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. Low, faint, but unmistakable. A triplet pattern. Then pause. Then an echo modulation. That modulation was Jonathan's fingerprint. He had designed it to bounce between dense sonar clouds, masking itself as environmental noise. But I knew its signature. I knew the shape of his mind. I ran it through a correlation model. The result wasn't a ghost. It was a path. Someone or something was broadcasting Jonathan's ping. Repeatedly. At precise intervals. Deep within contested waters where no allied vessel had declared presence. It was a breadcrumb. And someone had risked everything to make sure I found it. When I showed Captain Granger, he didn't speak. Just stared at the screen for a long time. Then he said, "We sail in 6 hours." I nodded. There was nothing else to say. Outside the control room, the Eclipse began to hum. A vibration through the deck plating. The silence was over. Something was coming. The first time I heard the code, I was 15. Jonathan had written it on a napkin. We'd been at a diner just off Route 1, halfway between Annapolis and the place we used to call home. He was in his 2nd year at the academy. I was just starting to realize how much of him the Navy would take. He called it, our shadow song. A pattern of chirps and silences drawn out like music. It wasn't standard encryption. It was something else, something personal. A handshake only the 2 of us would recognize. A code not built for war but for finding each other in the dark. Someday, he'd said, when it matters, you'll hear this. You'll know it's me. Back then I laughed. It felt like a game. Now, 3 years after his declared death, I was following that same song through sonar clouds in the North Atlantic, and the laughter was long gone. The Eclipse moved slow. Submerged. Quiet. She ran deep, colder than I liked. We passed beneath old Soviet trenches, through collapsed ridgelines, skimming fault zones where heat bled from the Earth itself. We weren't on a patrol. We were on a hunt. Every scan we made, every ping we received, I compared against that sequence, Jonathan's sequence. And every time it returned stronger. It was leading us somewhere. Captain Granger never asked about my brother. But he knew. That much was clear. Sometimes he'd linger behind me in the control bay, watching as I layered data across bathymetric maps, overlaying signal strength, current flow, and enemy drone activity. Once he said quietly, "You hear things most of us miss." I didn't respond. We both knew he wasn't talking about sonar. On the 7th day, we intercepted a UUV. Unmanned underwater vehicle. Foreign build. It had slipped beneath one of our westward buoys and was attempting to mask itself as part of the thermal outflow. My algorithm caught the pattern drift. Granger gave the order. 2 divers, 30 minutes, full silent extraction. We recovered the unit intact. It was a rough shell, tarnished, algae-streaked. But inside, its system was pristine. Too pristine. It wasn't broadcasting. It was recording. When we cracked its core, the surprise wasn't the data volume. It was the encryption. Layered beneath telemetry logs was a legacy code. A modulation pulse sequence buried in a redundant control chip. I stared at it for a long time. My fingers hovered over the console. It was Jonathan's signal. Identical. But not just a fragment this time. Full string. The device had received it. Logged it. More than that, someone had designed this UUV to carry it. Which meant the signal wasn't just a flare from a wreck or a corrupted echo from a lost sub. It was part of something active. Controlled. Someone down there was broadcasting. And someone else had built systems to find it. Jonathan's code was being passed along by hands not our own. Granger looked at me. What does it mean? I didn't answer right away. Because it meant one of 2 things. Either my brother had survived the loss of the Clearwater, or someone had taken the sub, kept it intact, repurposed it. A ghost ship operating off-map. In Jonathan's code, our shadow song was either a cry for help or a trap. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the cot in my darkened room aboard the Eclipse, listening to the creaks of the hull as pressure flexed against steel. A slow sound, rhythmic, like a breath. I thought about the Clearwater's last known location, about the reports filed and buried, about the rushed memorial, the folded flag given to my parents, the empty casket. I thought about the anomaly logs the Navy deleted, the ones I'd flagged. They had known. Someone at the top had known. Not about Jonathan, maybe, but about the signal. They'd erased it, covered it, redirected me quietly instead of silencing me permanently. Because what they feared wasn't the story, it was the proof. A hijacked sub, a classified vessel off books, a new kind of warfare using our own against us. Jonathan had vanished without wreckage, without oil slick, without transmission. But now his voice was returning, measured, recurring, intentional. He was alive, or at least a version of him still lived inside those signals. The past wasn't gone. It had gone deep, and I was going after it. The sea changes when you know someone's still inside it. Before, it had been an expanse threat in theory. After the UUV, it became intimate. A haunted house. Every echo meant something. Every silence pressed closer. We tracked the origin of the repeating signal, a deep trench northeast of the Janes Ridge. Volcanic. Inhospitable. The kind of place even whales avoid. Granger had maps older than I was, annotated by hands long retired. We plotted the path in silence. Eclipse dipped into deeper layers, the water blackening beyond visibility, temperatures dropping to near freezing. Down here, light means exposure, and exposure means death. But we weren't alone. At 0300, a soft proximity alert lit the console. I ran a passive sweep. The pattern was irregular, mechanical but organic. Someone or something was shadowing us. I filtered the data through my software. The signature matched nothing in the Allied database. Not Chinese, not Russian, not civilian. And then I saw it. A double tap in the sonar stream, brief, artificial, like a heartbeat. It was Jonathan's signal again. Only this time it wasn't repeating. It was responsive. I turned to Granger. It's talking to us. His jaw clenched. Can you answer? I hesitated. If I transmit, they'll know we're here. They already do. We initiated a reply, a quiet echo built from Jonathan's code, distorted enough to look like sonar scatter, precise enough to be unmistakable to whoever had embedded it. The trench came into view 12 hours later. We dropped drones. They drifted through the water like seeds. The trench walls were steep, jagged. The pressure here could collapse a hull in seconds. Then the signal stopped. Not faded. Not lost in noise. Just stopped. And then, as if on cue, something else rose from the depth. Not a submarine. A drone cluster. 10 units, matte gray, low profile, riding the trench's edge like sentries. We froze. Passive sensors only. Lights off. I watched them pass. No markings. No propulsion trail. Designed for stealth. Built by someone who understood our systems and how to defeat them. They weren't searching. They were guarding. We stayed submerged for 3 days. Granger rationed energy. We rotated shifts, running systems on bare minimum. No transmissions. Just waiting. Then a break, thermal movement detected mid-trench. We deployed one drone with a fiber optic tether. Its descent was slow, careful. What it saw made me stop breathing. A hull. Not wreckage. A vessel intact resting in the trench. No lights. No flag. But the outline was familiar. USS Clearwater. Submerged. Silent. Entire. She wasn't sunk. She'd been placed. There were hull modifications, external modules, drone ports. She had been altered, repurposed. But she was there. And her beacon, Jonathan's beacon, had been real. I stared at the image, my hand against the screen. Somewhere in that steel body he might still be breathing. Or maybe not. Maybe he'd left only pieces of himself behind. Signals. Traces. A memory loop set to repeat until someone found it. We prepared a probe for closer recon. I insisted on designing the path. I knew Clearwater's structure better than anyone on the Eclipse. I'd studied her specs for years, hoping to learn what the reports refused to say. We deployed just before night cycle. The probe drifted down, silent, small. Its camera flickered, then stabilized. There, etched into the side of the clear water, beneath layers of silt and algae, were letters faint but readable. J. M. Helps those who listen. Jonathan's initials. Not regulation. Not Navy. A message. Not just to me. To anyone willing to believe he hadn't gone quiet willingly. The probe circled once, then flicked its camera downward into a side port. Inside, systems still running. Dim emergency lights. A glow faint as breath. Alive. Not in the biological sense. But functionally. The clear water wasn't a ghost. She was a prison. Or a lab. Or worse, a vessel caught between silence and betrayal. I didn't cry. There was no room for it in that moment. Only the stillness of confirmation. He'd left his trail. And we had found it. I thought finding the clear water would feel like arrival. Instead, it felt like another threshold. Like standing before a sealed door, knowing it leads to something that won't let you return the same. We stayed in place 3 more days, mapping her in silence. Granger gave me full access to the probe feeds, the control protocols. He didn't ask questions anymore. Whatever the Eclipse had been assigned to do, he'd redrawn that mission around my knowledge, my instinct. Trust doesn't always come from rank. Sometimes it comes from quiet persistence. The way someone stays when it would be easier to leave. The probe's cameras fed us grainy images, sections of the Clearwater's hull pitted with time, others smooth and retrofitted. Whoever had claimed her had done it methodically. No breach. No collapse. She'd been submerged whole. The signal Jonathan had embedded wasn't just a breadcrumb trail, it was part of the system now. Woven into the very infrastructure of the hijacked vessel. We sent in a second probe, this one tethered to a command line I coded myself. I used the old ping we'd written as kids. A sound signature only Jonathan and I would ever use. Not military. Not technical. Personal. At first, nothing. Then the lights came on. Soft. Dim, but unmistakable. We froze as the monitors flickered. Interior lights battery level. One hallway lit. Then another. No movement. No bodies. Then in the comms feed, a file appeared. Unmarked. Encrypted. But the encryption method, it was his. A legacy hash Jonathan had once used during a simulator tournament. He'd embedded a timestamp into every command string so we could track who took what during fleet simulations. Inside the file, compressed telemetry data. Ship movement logs. Crew manifest blank. System activity active for 18 months post-incident. And at the end, one text file. 17 kilobytes. I opened it alone. No name. No sign-off. Just. They took the ship intact. We were boarded. No surface engagement. I locked them out of sonar and embedded a trail. If you're reading this, I failed to stop them. But you're listening. Don't trust the surface chain. They knew. They redirected you for a reason. This is still mine. I've left pieces of me here. Granger read the message over my shoulder. He didn't say a word. Just placed a hand lightly on the console beside me. A steady presence. The way he stood, like a man holding a flag that shouldn't be dropped. We pulled back the probe. The Eclipse surfaced briefly under low cloud cover. We transmitted the findings to an encrypted node only accessible to top-tier defense protocol. Granger's orders. His decision. 2 days later, we received a dead channel confirmation. No response. No order. Just an inbound package, a priority courier from a black classified contact. It included 2 things. 1. Authorization for a new mission designation, Eclipse reassigned as temporary command platform for undersea anomaly retrieval. 2. A commendation. Not public. Not even signed. Just 3 words printed on a single line. Operational asset redeemed. I had to read it twice before I understood what it meant. They weren't admitting anything. They weren't apologizing. But they were listening now. The next month passed in data retrieval and high-risk probe runs. We avoided drone swarms, countered signal scramblers. Every trace we found confirmed the same thing. The Clearwater had not been lost. She had been repurposed. And Jonathan had fought from the inside to leave his mark behind. His voice never appeared in audio logs. His face wasn't on the camera feeds. But his code, his signals were everywhere. Embedded in core diagnostics, jerry-rigged into fail-safe routines, looped through ballast commands. His presence was like a hand on my shoulder, always just behind me. Sometimes I caught myself whispering back. Weeks later, one of our probes returned with a corrupted NAV unit from the Clearwater. Inside, embedded in a locked segment, was a personal note. Rachel. If this is you, I'm sorry. I tried to hold them off. They don't want the world to know what we became. But if anyone could find me, it was you. Keep listening. Jay. I didn't speak for a long time. Granger stayed near, his silence respectful. I finally said he didn't want to be rescued. Granger nodded once. He wanted to be found. We compiled the data into a report, redacted what we had to, preserved what mattered. Our findings were classified, but copies were sent, sealed in private channels, locked to defense architecture too deep for audit. 1 week later, Granger handed me a letter. It wasn't an order. It was an invitation. A quiet briefing in a sealed room beneath the Pentagon. I wore civilian clothes. No name tag. No rank. They handed me a citation. No cameras. No medals. Just a man in a dark suit saying, "We're changing protocols because of your work." I didn't ask for details. Some truths aren't meant for press releases. Afterward, Granger and I walked the halls in silence. He led me to a corridor beneath the operations archive. One wall bore a plaque. Just a name. USS Clearwater. Status, presumed operational, redacted theater. A single rose rested beneath it. Granger stepped back and let me stand alone. I placed my hand on the cool metal and whispered only once. "I heard you." Time folds quietly when you're in the shadows. Months passed. The Eclipse docked once, refit, restock, rotate crew. I stayed. Granger stayed. The mission had shifted, but our purpose remained the same. We became watchers. Jonathan's code lived on, not just in the Clearwater, but now in our systems, ghosts informing protocols. My algorithms became standard for counter-intrusion subacoustic defense. They called it Project More. Internally, no press. It was enough. One morning, Granger handed me a secure data key. Inside, a full record of Jonathan's last recorded system entries. All of them time-stamped within 3 weeks after his sub went dark. He had been alive far longer than the Navy admitted. That night, I went alone to the Memorial Hall. The classified one buried 6 stories beneath Arlington, behind biometric locks and red lights. No tour groups. No photographs. Just plaques. Rows of steel, unmarked by year or conflict. At the far end, a new one had been mounted. USS Clearwater. Status, Legacy Silent Operator. Personnel, redacted. Signal status, Echo confirmed. I stood before it for a long time. No one interrupted. No one else needed to. A plaque isn't a grave, but it holds the weight of a name, and names hold the weight of memory. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the fragment of paper Jonathan had once scribbled our signal on. Folded. Worn thin. I tucked it beneath the steel, then stood back. He wasn't forgotten. Not anymore. Some battles happen in the light. In full view with headlines and commendations, clean uniforms, proud handshakes. Others are quieter. Fought beneath the waves, between classified frequencies and redacted files. Where truth isn't erased, it's buried. Where those who serve do so without applause and victories are measured in silence. I live in that space now. Not in exile. Not in disgrace. But in the quiet middle ground where duty doesn't wear medals and honor isn't something you display, it's something you carry. They gave me back my clearance. Reinstated, though no ceremony marked it. I asked for no reassignment. I asked only to keep listening. And they let me. I operate now from a signal operations cell 3 levels beneath Joint Base Anacostia Balling. No sign on the door. No rank on the wall. Just screens. Sound. Echoes. Sometimes I think I still hear Jonathan's code, distant, fragmented, like memory. Maybe he's still out there. Maybe he's long gone. But I keep listening. Because someone has to. Because the sea, like silence, doesn't forget. It just waits to be heard.